In our previous tutorial, we learned how to use a variable to change the direction of an element that just keeps bouncing back and forth, and using the keys on our keyboard in order to also change the direction by setting the variable. In this case, the variable was called speed. Right? And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create something that's going to bounce off this little line. And to do that, I'm first going to create a new sprite. So you see here, this is of course down here, and I'm going to draw my own sprite, and I'm going to use the circle element, and I'm going to draw it right here. Oh, and if I hold down the shift key, I can make almost a perfect sphere, and there I go, and that's going to be my little ball that's going to bounce off, and there you go, and there it is, right? And so you see each sprite has its own script. Of course, this one has the one which bounces off back and forth like that. And now for the sprite, we're going to create a very similar script, but we're going to bounce it up and down instead. So remember, we want to control, and we want it when the program starts executing by the user clicking the green flag up here. So that's the first control that I'm going to introduce, or control block, right? And when I do that, I want to do the same thing as we did in the previous tutorial. I want my element to move, my sprite to move to a very specific place on the screen, on the stage, and I'm just going to leave it at 0, 0, so it's going to start here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by having the ball moving downwards. And you know, when we're on this axis, the y-axis, a negative number is going to be downwards, and a positive number is going to be upwards. So I'm going to use a control loop here, and I'm going to use the forever loop, and I am simply going to move 10 step. And if I wanted it to move downwards, I'm not going to move it 10 steps. I'm going to, oh, you know what? Let me do something different, actually. Let me change the Y. Let me remove that, and let me change the Y bias. So I'm not just moving it, because then I would have to make sure it's pointing in the right direction, because move will move it in whatever direction the sprite is pointing. And usually when it starts off, it's pointing in that direction. So instead of that, I'm going to use my X and Y coordinates. And since I know this is the Y axis, I'm simply going to change my Y by a certain number. And if I want it to move downwards, I'm going to change Y by -10. And let's execute that and see what happens. And when I do that, you see, and it's falling downwards. But it doesn't do anything. It doesn't bounce, right? Now, of course, there is this thing, an if on edge bounce, but we don't want to do that. It's not actually going to do any good, because here we're using change Y by. So if we would just use the if on edge bounce, you would see it would just go boom, 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 because it's always moving downwards, because it's changing Y by a negative number. So we're going to create another variable, and we're going to make a variable, and then this, in this case, I'm going to call it the Y speed, right? And you see how I just, because I use this, usually I start off the name of my variable with a lowercase, and then if I have any other words inside of my variable, I started with an uppercase. This is why I say lowercase y and then uppercase s. So in this case, it's only for this sprite that I'm going to use the Y speed, okay? So I'm going to select for this sprite only. That means that Y speed can only be used for this little ball, right? So now I have my Y speed there, and what I'm going to do is that I am going to say, I'm going to do some sensing, right? But to do something, I'm going to say if, just like I did before, for the other sprite, I'm going to do if, and then I'm going to do touching, and then I'm going to select the edge. If touching edge, then I am going to change my Y speed. So in this it's set, and here it says set speed to, and in this case I'm going to click on the drop down arrow here, and instead of saying set speed, I'm going to set Y speed to, and again I'm going to use this operator, which is the multiplication operator, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply the variable itself by a negative number, by -1, which is going to change the direction of it, right? And of course, I have to make sure then that I change Y by not -10, because -10 will mean it's always moving downwards. I have to change it by whatever the Y speed is. So the Y speed, let's make sure that we start off the Y speed with being -10, -10, and then it's going to change depending on how we multiply it by -1. And so we want to take the Y speed and we want to change the Y speed by whatever the number is. So let's run that now just to make sure that, oh, wait a minute, set speed to change Y by Y speed. Hold on, let's see. It's not changing. Why not? Change Y by Y speed. Oh, you know what? It's right here is our problem. And this is always important when you're creating a program. You're going to have to figure out what the errors are in your code. And in this case, I forgot to change this part here to Y speed. So I have to set the Y speed to -10. So let's try it again and let's run the script. And there it goes, and it goes down and it bounces up and down, right? Now what I can do is, of course, I can introduce another control. So let's stop our script, and I can introduce another control, and I can use the block, the if block again, and I'm going to use it inside the forever loop, and I am going to check and see if, and I'm going to use sensing, and I'm going to do if touching, and in this case I'm not going to do the edge. I'm going to say if touching sprite 1, which is my sprite here, if it's touching sprite 1, I am going to do exactly the same thing I did here. I'm going to change the direction in which the ball is bouncing. And so I go back into my variables and I choose set speed to, but it's not the speed, of course. That was the error I did last time. I want to set the Y speed to, and I use my operators again. I use the multiplication here, and I'm going to use the multiplication operator, and I'm going to use the variable itself, the Y speed variable, and I'm going to multiply it by a negative number, of course. And this means that anytime that the ball touches the sprite 1, it is going to change direction. So let's see what happens when we execute this. And let's go. And nothing is happening right now. But now I can use my keys to change the direction of my sprite, of my first sprite here. And no, I missed it. Oh, there I go. And it's going up and down. And really, I'm getting very close to creating a Pong. I managed to actually bounce it off. You see, I have to be very careful. And here, I'm already at the verge of creating a kind of interesting game. Oh, I missed it again. And this was one of the first games that people actually played. It's called Pong. And in Pong, the ball would change, not just go up and down. Of course, it would go to the side as well. But we'll look at in a different tutorial how to do that. And there, I managed to. I'm managing to keep it down. And I'm really, really excited about this game. Well, let's see if we can make it even more exciting. All right, try it yourself.